Good evening and welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Ukrainian Institute of America. I'm Lydia Zeininger. I'm the director here at the Institute. Before we begin our program tonight, we have sadly started a tradition here where before our programs, we join together. I ask you to stand with me for a moment of silence to reflect on the sacrifices being made, even as we're gathered here by Ukrainians fighting for their country, willing to sacrifice all. And let's pay tribute to the countless lives lost over 11 years of unprovoked war in Ukraine, including the nearly 3 years since the full-scale invasion. Thank you very much. We gather tonight not only to hear about a new book, but in remembrance and in honor of Victoria Amelina, an extraordinary writer, truth-teller, and defender of Ukraine, whose voice was silenced far too soon by Russia's brutal war. Though she's no longer with us, her words endure, bearing witness to the resilience and sacrifice of her generation. It's a privilege to host this evening in tribute to a Ukrainian hero who gave everything for her homeland, her people, and for the future of Ukraine. Before I welcome our special guests, I'd like to just make a few notes for you. Please silence your devices before we begin. I'd like to point your attention to the fact that we're videoing, which you can see. We hope to put the video up on our YouTube channel after the event so you can play it there. After the reception, after the program, join us please for a reception across the hall where we will have Ukrainian wine, beer, and cider, and some snacks. The exhibition in this room and in the other room is photographs in a series called Saints, which we are proud to host by Sasha Maslov. The photographs are available. There's an auction, there's a QR code, and you can bid on them. The proceeds will go to the Come Back Alive Foundation. I hope I got that right. Join us also in a new installation participatory project that we've started, which is called Ribbons of Resilience. In tribute to Ukrainians, we decided to build a sort of memorial for what's happening. And we're going to be putting blue and yellow ribbons along our Fifth Avenue fence with messages that people are sending in to us that you can write here on little cards, and we'll affix those to the fence, and we're going to leave them there as long as we can. So now I'm glad to introduce our special guests for the evening, Tetyana Teren of Penn, Ukraine, who will be in conversation with our friend, Ukrainian Institute member, and journalist Lydia Tomkiw. Please join me in giving them a warm welcome.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for all coming tonight on a cold night. We thought it was only right to begin this evening by letting you all hear from Vika herself, and Tetyana very kindly sourced a video of her reading poetry in English at the Dublin Literary Festival, so we wanted to start with that this evening.
I will now read you a poem which I wrote just a couple of weeks ago in April, after returning from yet another mission to Izum and Balaklia, where we had uncovered several torture chambers, and after talking to women who lost their loved ones. So, a poem about a crow. In a barren springtime field stands a woman dressed in black, crying her sisters' names like a bird in the empty sky. She'll cry them all out of herself. The one that flew away too soon, the one that had begged to die, the one that couldn't stop death, the one that has not stopped waiting, the one that has not stopped believing, the one that still grieves in silence. She'll cry them all into the ground, as though sowing the field with pain. And from pain and the names of these women, her new sisters will grow from the earth, and again will sing joyfully of life. But what about her, the crow? She will stay in this field forever, because only this cry of hers holds all those swallows in the air. Do you hear how she calls each one by her name? The poem is translated by William Blaker. I thank you very much for your solidarity, dear Irish people, for being here today and standing with Ukraine for all this time. Ireland has become special to me, and it became safe haven for my friends who are here today. And Irish pen always makes me feel at home here, as if our two edges of Europe were meant to be bonded in a very special way. But I will now also read one more poem addressing it to Ukrainians in the audience, although it will be in English translation as well. The homecoming story. When Mira left home, she took a bead from her jewelry box. When Tim was leaving his town, he picked up a rock from the street. When Yarka was leaving her garden, she took an apricot pit. When Vera was leaving home, she took nothing at all. I will be back soon, she muttered, and took nothing. Mira has grown a jewelry box from her bead. She's growing a new home in the box. Tim has started a city from his rock. It looks just like his hometown, except there is no sea. Yarka has planted her apricot bead. Now she has her orchard around it. And Vera, who took nothing at all, she is telling this story. When you're fleeing home, she says, it gets smaller behind you to save itself. Your home can turn into a gray rock, a bead, last year's apricot bead, even a Lego part, a seashell from Crimea, a sunflower seed, a button from the dad's uniform. And then the home fits into your pocket, and there it sleeps. You should pull home out when you feel safe or ready. Little by little, your home will grow, and you will never, remember, never be homeless. So, what did you take with you, Vera? I only took this story, the story about homecoming. Here, I pulled it out into the light. Look, it is growing. Thank you so much. Slava Ukraini!
Very powerful. I wanted to actually ask to start if you could tell us a little bit about when you met Vika, how you became friends, and what she was like as a person and a friend.
Lydia, thank you so much for moderating this conversation today. And it's a little bit difficult to speak after this video, and it's already my second experience because yesterday we did the same in the Ukraine house in Washington, and I need just, some time to start speaking again after this video. I'm very honored to be here and have this opportunity to speak on behalf of Victoria and her family and her beloved sisters and friends here in New York. And I'd like to start from my thank you to the Ukrainian Institute of America, to St. Martin Press, and to Razum for Ukraine for your help and for all your efforts to publish and spread Victoria's words and thoughts here in America. So, returning to your question, I met Victoria in 2015 after the publication of her first novel, The Fall Syndrome. And we became really close friends when I came to PEN Ukraine to work as the executive director of this organization. And I remember that just on the first day of my work there in 2018, she wrote to me that if you have any ideas of human rights campaigns, initiatives and activities, please invite me and involve me into these activities, because she was a human rights defender for me, first of all. Maybe even this role is more important for me as her role in Ukrainian literature, because Victoria had a huge empathy for everyone in her community, in Ukrainian culture, and in our country and in other countries of the world. So because of that, she was one of the most active PEN members, and I speak not only about PEN Ukraine, but also about PEN International community and family. So we started speaking a lot, and we traveled together, for example, to India to take part in the PEN International Congress in 2018. We traveled together to London to take part in the London Literary Book Fair. And also we had a lot of travels across Ukraine within PEN Ukraine's volunteering trips to the frontline and liberated territories of Ukraine. So one more important part of our friendship, of course, this is the beginning of the full-scale war, because Victoria was among that people who wrote to me when I stayed in Kyiv, the capital, that if I need to find a safer place in Ukraine, and if I decide to move to western parts of Ukraine, I always can find this place in Victoria's apartment in Lviv. And then just in 1 week, I left Kyiv, and I spent approximately 3 weeks with Victoria in her apartment in Lviv, where I came with my friend, her mother, her granny, and their 3 cats. And Victoria always had place for everyone, for every person, and for every animal in her apartment in Lviv. And what is also important for me in this friendship, that Victoria was a person who always motivated and inspired everyone to launch different campaigns and projects. And I had a lot of book projects, cultural initiatives, which Victoria inspired me to launch and create. And another great Victoria's feature, that she was so great in connecting people. You know, always when she met someone who was talented, who is bright, she returned home and creating all these chats for everyone and trying to introduce everyone to each other, because she wanted nice people to know each other in this world. And even in this audience, I have people I know thanks to Victoria. And you know, I still believe and I feel that Victoria is present in my life and in life of her friends and colleagues. And she continues bringing amazing people to my life. For example, all the heroines of this book, now also my great friends and my sisters.
And so the book starts out with Victoria buying a gun, and it's on her bed amongst summer dresses because she's packing for an ill-timed vacation to Luxor, Egypt. And, she's questioning why a, quote, nearsighted bookworm bought a gun. And we get a lot of these really rich and at times darkly funny descriptions of her thoughts throughout the book. And she also writes very early on in the book that since the war began in 2014 and with the full-scale invasion now, I, along with millions of my fellow citizens in Ukraine, have been in search of one thing: justice. The quest for justice has turned me from a novelist and a mother into a war crimes researcher. I was hoping you could talk to us about that transformation for her. On the back cover of the book is actually a photograph you took of Victoria looking at a destroyed building in 2022 in Saltyovka in Kharkiv, and what that transition was like from her, from going from a writer to working for Truth Hounds and that quest for justice.
Yeah, thank you so much for this question, because I really want to share this story with you about our first trip to Kharkiv after the full-scale war started. It was in June 2022. And I mentioned already that I spent some weeks with Victoria in Lviv. And of course, we were speaking a lot about the situation in Ukraine. And Victoria saw that I was checking the news about Kharkiv and Kharkiv region all the time, because this is my second native city in Ukraine. And she saw that, of course, I was worrying a lot about my people in this city, about my favorite buildings, my streets, and all my places I love in this city. And then she told me that, if you decide to go to Kharkiv one day, please take me with you, because I don't want you to go alone to Kharkiv now during these difficult days. So please just remember about my offer and this idea. So I mentioned already this amazing inspiration Victoria gave to everyone. And when she told me that it's really possible to go to my city, to the city I love, I decided to invite other Ukrainian writers to join us, and we gathered, it seems, 5 Ukrainian great authors to join us. And we went to Kharkiv first time at the beginning of June 2022. And I think this trip gave us so much motivation and energy and love that it changed my life, my work, and also I think somehow Victoria's work, and helped her to finish this transformation you mentioned. So in Kharkiv we met so many wonderful people. For example, we visited the Ukrainian church there, where the Archbishop Igor Isichenko, also my teacher at the university in Kharkiv, where he continues his service, but also this church now is one of the most important volunteering centers in Kharkiv. And when you visit the church in the city near the front line, and you see that priests, for example, sharing bread with people at the entrance of this church, then you see that they opened a kitchen for volunteers and soldiers in this church, and you see this huge amount of food and other humanitarian needs in their rooms and halls. It was something really unbelievable. And if you think that you have some challenges and problems in your life during the war, and then you see this life in Kharkiv, and when you listen to these people and speak to them, you just have much more energy in your life and more understanding what you should do and what you must do during these circumstances for your country. So when we returned from Kharkiv, that time I understood that, okay, I want to organize such trips for Ukrainian intellectuals and for foreign intellectuals every month. And during these months after 2022, we have organized more than 30 such trips to all liberated and frontline territories of Ukraine, bringing books to Ukrainian libraries and bringing all things which our soldiers or volunteers need in these areas. And the same was with Victoria, because of course, as everyone in Ukraine, after not just 2022, but after 2014, everyone was trying to understand what is the right place and right role for everyone to be as much useful as it's possible in these circumstances. And you remember maybe that after 2014, Victoria launched the literary festival in New York, another New York in Ukraine, Donetsk region. And I always say that Victoria was smarter than I am or other cultural managers in Ukraine, because she was feeling that it's so important to work in these areas of Ukraine, not just in the capital, not just in Lviv, but near the front line, especially to work with children and local people in these regions of our country. So she created this festival in 2021, and Victoria organized only one festival because she was killed by Russia. But her colleagues and friends continued this very important, fascinating work for children and for people from Ukrainian New York. Then after 2022, she started writing poetry, because before that she wrote 2 novels and 2 books for children. Then she started writing poems. Then she decided to help other organizations abroad with volunteering initiatives. And I remember that Razum for Ukraine sent in different necessary things for Ukrainian volunteering organizations. And we spent some time with Victoria at the warehouse in Lviv, sorting medicine and other necessary things from Razum. But also Victoria was helping as a translator, as a facilitator between Razum and other volunteering organizations in Lviv. And of course, she invited all people to stay in her apartment in Lviv. She found money and people to help other colleagues and friends to evacuate with children to other countries or areas in our country. She collected money, and then there were some very important events in her life, because she went to the Kyiv region after liberation of this area of Ukraine and met some of our colleagues like Olena Styashkina, Larisa Denisenko, Svetlana Povalyeva, Ukrainian writers who stayed in Kyiv during that first very difficult days. Then there was a huge tragedy in Kramatorsk when Russians attacked the train station in Kramatorsk, and many Ukrainians were killed in this city. Then our trip to Kharkiv together, and her meeting with Alexandra Matvichuk, Ukrainian human rights defender and Peace Nobel Prize winner. And then there was one more meeting with the Truth Hounds organization, which is documenting Russia's war crimes since 2014. So all these events, all these meetings and conversations helped Victoria to understand that, okay, it's still possible to be a writer during the war, but if you want to continue being a writer, you should find this right language, right vocabulary, right style, right language and right genre for this work. So Victoria decided to become a war crimes researcher, to work with Truth Hounds team, and to start writing her first non-fiction book about Ukrainian women who are documenting Russia's war crimes against our country. And it was her main idea to write this book in English for the foreign audience.
Yeah, and Victoria was with a delegation of Colombian writers. For those who don't know, on June 27th in 2023, they were in Kramatorsk at the end of a long day at a pizzeria, and a Russian missile hit. 13 people, including Victoria, were killed and 64 were injured. And at the time of her murder by Russia, about 60% of the book had been written. And you and your colleagues so very powerfully write in the afterword of the book, this really struck me, that life under the conditions of war, with its daily losses, has taught us that there is only one way to deal with the pain, to continue the work of the people we love. So could you tell us about getting this manuscript sort of at 60%, working together with her husband and your colleagues to put together the book we have today?
I need, in this case, to share some dates and some facts in chronology of all these events around this book and Victoria's story, because after 2022, when after autumn 2022, when the Ukrainian army liberated the Kharkiv region, and especially here, I mean village Kapitolivka, Izium region, where another Ukrainian writer, Volodymyr Vakulenko, was murdered by Russia in March 2022. Victoria was the first person who came to Volodymyr Vakulenko's yard and helped his parents to find his diary of occupation, which Volodymyr buried in his garden when he understood that Russian soldiers can came again and arrest him and maybe kill him. And then 1 year after all these events, we were working on editing and publication of Volodymyr Vakulenko's book. And just 4 days before the tragedy in Kramatorsk, we presented this book first time at the Book Arsenal Festival in Kyiv with Victoria, with Volodymyr Vakulenko's family, and with all his colleagues and friends. To be honest, I was completely exhausted after this work, because it was not only about this book. We organized Volodymyr's funeral, and Victoria describes this moment in this book. And 5 days before the tragedy, she decided to send me the final manuscript of this book. Because Victoria knew that many Ukrainian writers, especially soldiers, decided to send me their unfinished or unpublished texts, because no one knows when you live inside the war. No one knows what can happen with you, and in this case, it's better to have someone who can save your manuscript, maybe for the future of this text. So 5 days before, Victoria decided to send me her manuscript. You should know that Victoria had an amazing sense of black humor all the time. So she wrote to me that, I'm going to Kherson. So just 1 day before the Book Arsenal, she went to Kherson to speak to one of her heroines. And she decided to send this manuscript because Kherson was liberated by the Ukrainian army, but now it's heavily attacked by Russians every day. So again, no one knows what can happen, which mine or which missile Russian can send to these cities. So please just save this manuscript and stay in touch with my husband if something happens. So when the tragedy happened, and we had last days with Victoria in a hospital in Dnipro, and after the funerals in Kyiv and Lviv, we decided to speak to Alex Amelin, Victoria's husband, about the future of this text. And it was the first moment at the beginning of July 2023, when I started reading this manuscript, and I should say that it was very helpful for me to get over this feeling of pain and heartbreaking loss. And I should say that Victoria sent me some chapters, some parts of this book before, when she just started this work. And then in July 2023, I started reading this text like a book. So first of all, during last 10 years of my life, I am a manager and I'm working with some management processes in Ukrainian culture. So I started thinking who we need to involve in this work, because as you mentioned already, Lydia, Victoria finished approximately only 60% of her main idea and main composition of this book. And we decided to involve 2 more people, responsible people who know English, who can help us with editing, who knew Victoria first of all. So then we created our editorial group. I remember that Emma Shercliffe, Victoria's agent, wrote once that this is amazing editorial group, and I love saying like this because I'm so happy and honored that I know these people. Alex Amelin, Victoria's husband, Irina Hrusha, also Ukrainian author who lives in Italy, and Sasha Dovzhik, great Ukrainian author, editor, and cultural manager. So 4 of us were working on this task, I can say, on this book, because Victoria was working on this book. We were working during approximately 1 year, I think, and we had a tradition to meet every week for sometimes 1, 2, 3, 4 hours to discuss every page of this book. What should we do in this case? What can we explain to the audience? What can we do with some empty pages in this book? So I think it was a very supportive tradition for all of us, and during that year we became like a family for each other. And of course it was a very complicated task because our main decision was that we will not change anything in this book because this is Victoria's work and we have no right to change anything in this manuscript. But on the other hand, we had this understanding that it could be difficult for the audience to read this book without like some editor's help. And because of that, our team prepared more than 100 footnotes for this book, just to help to understand some Victoria's ideas and especially historical context, which is very important for reading this book. When we have empty pages, when we have just raw notes in this book, we were also trying to explain and to prepare the audience for this maybe complicated reading. One more task for us was to compare different versions of this text because Alex Amelin, who knows Victoria's archive in the smallest details, he helped us to have this access to this archive, and we compared different drafts of these chapters, and sometimes Victoria like had more completed versions in her archive, not like in this manuscript. And in these cases, we also like emphasize that, dear readers, here we decided to add more completed version of this text. And also we wrote our afterword and asked our friends from PEN Canada to involve Margaret Atwood for the foreword of this book.
Yeah, I mean, for me as a reader, the editor's notes were very helpful and also very powerful because you have things that just say this section was not finalized or this sentence is left unfinished. Others give very good detail on Ukrainian history and people involved. And towards the end, especially, her fieldwork notes are incredibly powerful to just see on their own because you realize how many towns interviews she was doing with people, just how many Russian war crimes were being committed. So to me, the combination of the two was very, kind of praise you guys for doing what you did because it was a very, I think, difficult task, but it came together in a very powerful way for me as a reader of this. And I think now we both wanted to read 2 segments. If you want to go first with yours.
I should find this this fragment. Yesterday I met the Archbishop Boris Gudzyak in Washington. I think many of you know this very important figure in Ukrainian even culture because he is a PEN author as well. And I presented my copy of this book to him. So I need to find this chapter I want to read you. So this fragment will be about Europe, and I think that maybe it sounds a little bit weird here in America, but I think it's so important now during these very difficult days for my country to remind all of us about values, about common values, which are the same for Europe and America, and which was so important for our dear Victoria. So this chapter is about very challenging moment for Victoria. So it was already second or third day of the full-scale war, and as maybe some of you knows already, Victoria met these first days not in Ukraine. She was in Egypt with her family, with her 11 years old son. And when she learned about the beginning of big war in Ukraine, she decided to return to her country. You can imagine that especially people who have children decided not to return to Ukraine, of course, because they were thinking about their children in this case. But for Victoria, it was just impossible to stay in another country at that moment. So she decided to find any possible ways to return home, and it was already impossible to go to Ukraine directly. So she found a very expensive ticket to Prague. When they came to Prague with her son Andriy, there was such a meeting with service like controllers in the airport, and then conversation with her son. And I'd like to read you this. It's not a long fragment, but I think it's important to read it. So, in the Prague airport, the border control officer, a young woman, glances at my passport and then stares at me. She seems to be more interested in the expression on my face than in my passport details. Perhaps she is new to the job and has not seen anyone whose country is being bombed. Maybe she is looking not at me, but at war. She stamps our passports without asking any questions. I nod and take the documents without a word as well. I cannot mumble thank you. I'm sobbing. Why are you crying, Mom? My son asks. Because we are home, I say. But this is not Ukraine, he says, confused. This is Europe, I answer, as in this word, Europe is a password that should explain everything to my child. It isn't, of course. The term Europe will be redefined in the next few days. The world is transforming, and the meaning of words are changing. I feel that in my inability to pronounce war, the quietness of my son and the gaze of the Czech border control officer. I weep not only because we are let in, but because it seemed that in looking at me, people have started seeing not me, but war. I am war. We, Ukrainians, all became a war. Nothing else about us matters now, only it, the catastrophe that has just begun. I buy train tickets to Poland. Through worried Europe, I'm heading home to Ukraine. There, I will be just myself at war, not war. Of course, my son is not coming with me. We are about to part. But he doesn't know this yet.
And I chose a segment in which she is speaking with lawyer and activist Larisa Denisenko, and to me it really shows her skill as a writer. It's very descriptive, and it also has a message on the future. It's 2 women, 1 dog, and countless victims of gender-based violence. It's so quiet, she repeats from time to time. I have already heard this from my friends who evacuated from Bucha, Kyiv, Kramatorsk, and Kharkiv. Everyone who lived through the constant artillery bombardment says the same. It's impossibly quiet. Silence scares them. It's okay. It will pass. You all say that, I tell her. Oh, really? Everyone? Everyone. Larisa and I meet on an empty square in Obolon, a northern district of Kyiv, where people stopped a Russian tank in the last days of February. Later, it seemed the tank was a military vehicle, not a tank, and there is also no certainty that it was indeed Russian. But the heroism of the Obolon citizens is unquestionable anyway. They were ready to stop Russian tanks. It's just that the Ukrainian military managed to stop them farther away. Still, Obolon wasn't a good place to be either at the end of February or in March. The sound of shelling was particularly loud in this district of Kyiv. You could not forget about the constant threat nearby. Larissa also could not forget what happened to her if Russian troops managed to enter the city. She is a lawyer and a women's rights activist, an active member of the Ukrainian women lawyers nonprofit, Yurfem. The first case of the Russian invaders raping a Ukrainian woman came to her in March. A friend wrote that there was a woman in Mariupol who needed help. Larissa, scared, devastated, and enraged by what was happening in the Kyiv region, replied that she was ready to help. What else could she reply? She also had no doubts about what was happening just a dozen kilometers to the east of the Obolon district in Kyiv, in occupied Bucha, Motzin, and Dvirka, and other villages. She was ready to help, and the cases kept coming. Can you help this woman? Yes, I can. It's the first time I see Larissa without makeup, in gray, nondescript clothes, and with a lost look on her face. She was always the brightest, a brunette with beautiful eyes, flowery suits, colorful jewelry, and an incomparable expertise in law and women's rights. Now, a month after the full-scale Russian invasion, it seems that only the expertise remains. Larissa looks like her own shadow. I brought her colorful candies as a present. She is looking at them in disbelief, as if colors all went away, broke into shades and disappeared as if washed away by tears. She talks, I listen. She has been listening to women throughout her law career. I have to listen to her now. Suddenly she stops, looks at me and asks, "Can you see the future?" I mean, I can see today, but I try to imagine our life in several years and I cannot. Even half a year or a month is hard. I just don't see it. I see it, I say. She waits for me to elaborate. I see the future. I mean, we might get hit by the Iskanders at this very moment, but at the same time, I somehow see Ukraine after the war. I don't know if we are in the future, but there is Ukraine after the war, I say, and turn away. Larissa nods and tells me how there are no bomb shelters and her elderly parents won't go there anyway. So she has been hiding in the corridor, behind two walls. Suddenly her mother calls. "Are you all right? When will you be home?" she asks, afraid to be alone and to lose her daughter. Larissa calms her down and we keep walking. Two women talking about the unspeakable and a cute bulldog boldly named Lucifer. In half a year in September, I will see a bulldog in liberated Izium, sitting next to a woman cooking food on a fire in front of her damaged apartment building. I will send Larissa the picture. By that time, Larissa will have returned to her colorful suits and bright earrings. But right now, that seems impossible. That magazine interviewed me and they want to take new pictures of me. Take the old ones, I told them, yet they insist. But how will I look at them? I go to my wardrobe, open it, and cannot understand what I'm seeing. The same with cosmetics. I don't know how I can use them now. I thought she has such wonderful descriptions of all the women she meets that you really want to meet all of them as well. Another question I really wanted to ask you, because I think she does a very good job of this throughout the book, is weaving in Ukrainian history, relating to events of the Holodomor, relating to today. And, Vika mentions early on that she was once a Russified little girl. That was how she describes it. And she writes very honestly about growing up with a lot of Russian writers and that so many Ukrainians were, of course, writers were murdered during the Soviet period and never really enter the European literary canon. And that changes, of course, for her and so many others. And I thought it was very powerful when she's evacuating early in the book, she brings 3 books with her. One on the executed Renaissance about the 1930s, a poetry collection by Hrytsko Chubay, who was part of the 60 Years generation, and a book by Deborah Vogel, who was a young Jewish poet killed in Lviv's ghetto in 1942. So I wanted to ask you about Tetyana Pilipchuk, the Kharkiv Literature Museum director, and just all the people in this book who are guarding and protecting Ukraine's literary and cultural heritage, and also what that looks like right now on the ground as we approach the 3-year anniversary.
You know, as I mentioned, Victoria was aimed to write this book for the foreign audience, and because of that, I think it was her main task to explain these historical reasons of the war and to bring some knowledge, some tools for understanding the real reasons of this war. Because usually when we speak to foreign media, when we speak to politicians or diplomats abroad, for them, Russia's war against Ukraine started in 2022. Okay, sometimes they are ready to speak about 2014. But it's impossible to understand their Russian goals in this war if you don't know about Ukrainian history, if you don't know about centuries of Russian genocide against our culture and our identity. And it was one of the main goals of Victoria when she started writing her essays in English for foreign media about executed Renaissance or about Holodomor or about Ukrainian 60s. And the same was in this book. So I mentioned also at the beginning that she wanted to write a collection of stories, reportage stories about Ukrainian women who are documenting war crimes. But later, because she was so talented writer, this genre and the composition of this book became more complicated. And because of that, it's so interesting to read this book. So she decided to add some fragments from her diary, for example, or some important quotes from some historical works, or fragments of interviews, or these reports from her missions, field missions with the Truth Hounds. And she had only this aim again and again to explain these connections between Ukrainian history and our current challenging time. And because of that, she, when she was writing, for example, about Kharkiv or Tetyana Teren, it was a way to tell us about thousands of Ukrainian intellectuals which the Soviet regime killed in 1930s, for example. And in the other cases, when she was writing about Alexandra Matviichuk, human rights defender, it was another way to tell us about Ukrainian 60ers, like about Vasyl Stus or Yevhen Sverstyuk, who were so important for Alexandra in her life and work. And you asked about Tetyana Teren, so this is only one of these heroines. Now we have 13 Ukrainian amazing bravery women. And Victoria wanted to include more voices and more stories, and Russia stopped this work and this aim. And I met Tetyana Teren, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago in Kharkiv. And she is a part of the Kharkiv Literary Museum. It's a really legendary institution in our country because these people preserving Ukrainian memory about our past, the main names in our culture, and just our memory, you know, because Russia has been trying in its different forms, has been trying to erase our culture, to erase our memory, to rewrite our history, and such institutions as Tetyana, now leading, help us to remember about the previous Russia's crimes against our culture. So Tetyana, first of all, is working with the period of the so-called executed Renaissance. And when we came to Kharkiv with Victoria at the beginning of June 2022, it seems it was first time when she met Tetyana. And Tetyana told us about the first day of the full-scale war and her work during the days, because her main aim was to save the collection of the museum, just not allow Russians to erase our culture again. So maybe later Tetyana will be able to share this like detective story with us, because now it's dangerous to share any facts about evacuation of Ukrainian cultural heritage. But of course, it's not only Tetyana's life and work, and I know dozens of Ukrainians who helped our culture and our cultural heritage to be alive now. And, I want to mention Ukrainian librarians because these are my personal heroes. And within our volunteering trips to the front line, we always visit Ukrainian libraries in small villages, in towns and cities of Ukraine. And for me, it's one more source of energy and power, thanks to these amazing women. And I can tell you, for example, about the wonderful library in Nikopol. Now it's also frontline, and this town is attacked every day, and they lose people every day in this town. But they are wonderful team in this library. They not just continue their work, not just continue spreading Ukrainian culture and literature in this town, but they also created the main shelter for people in this town, So it's not about the library's role maybe in our life, but they decided to be helpful for their people. Or another story about librarians in the Donetsk region, like Slovyansk or Kramatorsk. In these towns, it's only once I met such story and such people. They decided to evacuate their book funds from this area, which is now frontline. So they evacuated all books, but they continue their work without books because they can help people in other ways in this case. So they launched a humanitarian center in their library because for them, the main role of libraries to help people, to connect people, and to find, to give them this source of energy, of motivation and inspiration in these difficult times. So for me, all these people are just symbols of Ukrainian resistance.
I'm glad you said that because on my last reporting trip to Ukraine, I spent some time in a library, and it was really one of the most joyous parts of being there and just seeing so many kids discovering so many wonderful Ukrainian language books that have been published in the last couple of years. And throughout this book, actually, I encountered a couple of people I've interviewed myself that Victoria writes about who have continued writing books since the full-scale invasion. And before the talk today, I wanted to look up some statistics, and these are not perfect. They're UNESCO statistics from January 22nd of this year. And they've verified damage in Ukraine since the start of the full-scale invasion. And they listed 241 buildings of historical and artistic interest that have been damaged, 32 museums, 33 monuments, 18 libraries, and 1 archives. And, that could very well be an undercount because these are only the numbers that they've been able to cross-check, cross-reference. They are working on satellite monitoring techniques as part of this as well. So the last question I wanted to ask before we open it up to the audience is if you could share with us what the situation is currently like for writers, people in the arts in Ukraine, and what we here in the US can be doing to support Ukrainians that are continuing to create art. And as Victoria writes, unfortunately, that for every book about a Ukrainian, there seems to be about 5 for Putin still these days.
I'd like to start from these statistics because as a journalist, you maybe know that UNESCO and other international human rights organizations and others, they can work only with approved cases. And of course, this number is not correct. We know about more than 1,000 or maybe even 1,500 cases of damaged or ruined cultural objects in Ukraine since 2022. And another awful, terrifying statistics is about our cultural and media losses in Ukraine, because as a part of PEN Ukraine, we work with Russia's crimes against culture and media in Ukraine, and at this moment Russia has killed more than 180 Ukrainian artists, figures of Ukrainian culture, and more than 100 Ukrainian and foreign journalists. And your question about Ukrainian culture, about Ukrainian cultural resistance, and how can can we support Ukrainian culture and Ukrainian artists during these days? And since the beginning of full-scale war, my answer is the same. I ask people in all countries abroad to translate Ukrainian books. I think this is the most important thing because, of course, as a cultural manager, I want to ask you to organize exhibitions of Ukrainian art, to bring Ukrainian movies, Ukrainian theater projects to your city and to your country. But I think especially books can help us to show, to explain what is going on in Ukraine. And what is even more important for me, I'd like to ask you if you have such possibilities to translate Ukrainian classical literature, because this is one of Russian false narratives about Ukrainian culture or Ukrainian language as a part of Russian culture, and that Ukrainian culture started some 30 years ago or 100 years ago, and it's not true. And it's important for us to show this long duration of Ukrainian history and Ukrainian culture as a part of European cultural heritage. So my main request, please translate Ukrainian books, please read Ukrainian books, and please share such books as Victoria wrote with your colleagues, with your friends, your relatives, and your libraries as well. It's a very helpful thing to support Ukrainian literature now.
I wanted to open it up. Yeah, right here's got a question. I was going to.
We have questions from the audience?
I'll start.
I don't need it.
Oh.
You spoke about the evidence of crimes. Where is it held and what happens to it?
Oh, okay. There are different ways how we can work with evidence of crimes. And in this case, Victoria was working with the Truth Hounds organization. And they prepared all cases according to their rules, and then send this information to Ukrainian official institutions and courts and to the international courts in this case. But it's not only Truth Hounds, we have a lot of Ukrainian state institutions, human rights organizations, and even such cultural organizations as Pan Ukraine also can add evidence to this story of genocide and crimes against Ukrainians, because when we go to our volunteering trips to the front line, we're trying to collect as much as possible photos and videos and conversations, interviews with witnesses of this crime. And we know institutions abroad who work with the International Criminal Court and which can use all these materials in their work. Just 5 maybe days ago, it's already difficult to remember, but we had the first presentation of this book in London, and there was one really magic moment during this presentation, because one day before the presentation we had the first official offline meeting of our editorial group in one of the London's restaurants, and just suddenly we saw that the next table was to our table, and we saw that Philippe Sands, very famous lawyer and human rights defender and writer, was sitting near us. And Philippe Sands is also one of the heroes in this book, because Victoria included a long and very important and very professional interview with Philip to this book. So everyone was surprised by this fact, and Philippe shared a very important fact, the very important news with us, that there is a chance that in spring this year there will be created the tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine. And I remember that then at the presentation in London, Philip said that there is a huge part of Victoria's work in this news. And you know what was really fascinating for me in her work, that in every field she was trying to be professional, to be just perfect. And when she decided to become the war crimes researcher, it was not just because it sounds maybe like something unique, you know, in writer's biography, but she decided to become a professional war crimes researcher. And because of that, she was taking part in many Truth Hounds trainings, and she was reading all the time Ukrainian and international laws. And I remember how was she professional in all these conversations with lawyers, with advocates, with diplomats. And I can imagine how she could be happy that this tribunal could be launched soon.
Can I ask a question before I give you? Just to follow on, could you talk a little bit about PEN Ukraine's activities now and what sort of what authors are doing in the group?
Yeah, I'd like to do it briefly because I think it's time for Victoria's book in this case. But since Victoria was a very important part of this work, and she motivated us to launch many activities, I can say that at the beginning of full-scale war, as all Ukrainian NGOs, we had to change all our priorities in our work. And at this moment, we are focused on organization of these volunteering trips for Ukrainian and foreign intellectuals to the front line and liberated areas of Ukraine. We also have a big program, Unbreakable Ukrainian Libraries, within which we support Ukrainian damaged and ruined by Russians libraries. We launched our cultural space in February 2022 in Kyiv, and I'm proud to say that this is one of the most active cultural spaces now in the Ukrainian capital. We also have some advocacy programs for foreign journalists and writers who want to visit Ukraine or who want to write about the Ukrainian situation. We continue publishing books, non-fiction poetry, and other genres about the war. So this is our aim, to help Ukrainian writers to document this war reality now in Ukraine. And thanks to our partners and Razum for Ukraine, among them, we launched dozens of different fellowship programs for Ukrainian writers in need. And we continue looking for partners and donors who are ready to support this work, because, of course, the literary market, the book market in Ukraine now have very challenging times. So this is our task, to support these people and to find opportunities for them to continue their work during the war.
Thank you, Tetyana. Thank you, Lydia, for such stimulating conversation and very important information. My wife and I travel to Ukraine frequently. We've been there several times during the war. What we've noticed over the last 3 years is an incredible explosion of new bookstores in Kyiv and in Lviv. There used to be one and one. Now Hristiatic is filled with bookstores. And in speaking with the proprietors of the stores, I asked, where is this demand coming from? And I was very happy to hear that it's the younger generation that has an appetite for Ukrainian history because it was never taught in schools. And the demand is driving the supply of books. Can you comment on, being the executive director of PEN, how that may translate to activism among youth, which is very high in Ukraine, but it's somewhat theoretical and academic for this generation. How do you see this translating into the future? Because as you say, books teach, and that's how the younger generation learns. Thank you.
Yeah, it's important for me to hear about such observations in Ukraine. And usually, when we have guests from other countries, they're always surprised when they see this amount of new bookstores in different Ukrainian cities. And it's not only about Kyiv, you can visit Kharkiv, which is bombed quite often by Russians. And you can see these new bookstores at the Sumska Street, for example. So there are, I think, some reasons why this situation now is like this. One reason is that we don't have now like Russian presence in our country. I mean, Russian cultural and Russian propaganda's presence in our country. And because of that, first time during our independence, we have Ukrainian media, professional independent media in our country, and we have amazing Ukrainian cultural product. If you speak about books, if you speak about theater, music, art, and other parts of our culture. So now we just have space without Russian propaganda for all treasures we have in our cultural space. But you are right that this is a huge request from Ukrainian audience, and especially from these new generations of Ukrainians, because they are proud of being Ukrainians. And it's not only about this current moment of time. I think this process started in 2014, after the Revolution of Dignity, of course. But now this request is just enormous, and maybe even we don't have enough books and enough cultural products for these people. We have not only these amazing new bookstores, as for example the Sense bookstore at the Khreshchatyk Street, where we have 3 floors of Ukrainian books and all these like halls full of young people who want to take part in some book presentations or discussions. But also now, for example, it's difficult to buy tickets for the new Ukrainian theater plays. Always we have full halls when we speak about new Ukrainian movies, for example. We can have hundreds and in some cases even thousands of people who want to listen to Ukrainian poetry, Ukrainian contemporary poetry. So it's something unbelievable, I know, for other countries now, but you should understand that when you live in the war, when you live in the genocidal war, it's important for you to understand why this neighbor's country started this war against you, why these people hate you so much and don't believe that you have your own identity and your own culture. And of course, in this case, you want to know better who you are. And all our families and many generations of Ukrainians were Russified by the Soviet Empire, by the Russian Empire. And of course, now it's a moment of personal transformation, because all of us now want to know more about our relatives, about our families, about our native places in Ukraine. We want to preserve what we have, because of course Russians have been destroying our houses, our cultural heritage, all our places we love during centuries. And now it's time to preserve all these memories, all this knowledge, even inside us, and unfortunately the war, it's not a good moment, when we're losing people every day, but Ukrainians started returning to our roots. And of course, when I was a student, like 20 years ago, I couldn't even imagine how enormous like this process could be in our country. And it's not only in the capital, of course, in all areas of Ukraine, there is now this huge request to know who we are and to have, of course, these tools to explain other people who we are. And through books, it's the easiest way to do in this case.
Thank you for a great presentation. I'm Yuri Yanchish, and I teach art conservation in Ukraine on the 2 Fulbrights. And I was struck by the comparison of the Rostrina Generacija with her life. Over 90 years ago, many Ukrainians went out into the countryside like she did and documented Ukrainian culture, wrote about it as she did. But unlike them, she chose to write in English. So could you please give us some additional insights on why she decided to step outside of her Ukrainian heritage and her history and to share that in a different language with the world?
Thank you. I can't agree that she decided to write in English because she wanted to step outside the Ukrainian culture, of course. And, just yesterday in Washington, someone asked about the role model for Victoria in Ukrainian or foreign international culture. And I started thinking about this great woman, great Ukrainian artist, Alla Horska, who is also one of the heroines in this book. And Alla Horska had also very tragic and very bright story of her life and her work, because of course she was enormously talented Ukrainian artist during the Soviet period of our history. Alla Horska was killed by the Soviet regime, and Alla Horska, with other Ukrainian 60s artists like Les Tanyuk or Vasyl Simonenko and others, had to become crimes researcher, because these people, these great Ukrainian artists, opened Soviet crimes in Bykivnya, near our capital, and they shared the truth about all these crimes and about all Ukrainians killed in this part of our country. So Victoria compared her work with Alla Horska's work, and also she put this question into this book, why it's possible that again and again Ukrainian artists should dug these manuscripts from the Ukrainian land, as it was in the situation with Volodymyr Vakulenko's diary. But the question was about English, about this choice, and I already, it seems, trying to explain it, that there is no reason to write about the executed Renaissance for the Ukrainian audience, especially now when we have this huge request for Ukrainian culture and Ukrainian history inside our country. You should see these huge lines of people who wanted to visit Alla Horska's first huge exhibition in the Ukrainian house in the center of Kyiv. So you don't need to explain anything about our history for Ukrainians, but of course we still have all these gaps in understanding of the Ukrainian situation abroad. And it was her main task to do it. Since she was able to write in English, since she was really great in writing in English, she decided to try, and I should say that we don't have a lot of Ukrainian writers who could and who can do it in English. So Victoria could do it, and for me it's also a sign of bravery to work with another language which is not your native language. And when you start reading this book, when you start reading especially these first chapters with which Victoria finished and edited, you will see that she is very talented in this language. She's very talented in this genre. And I think that it was the right decision to do it, because we still don't have enough books about Ukraine in other countries. So now we have this book, and this is one more evidence of Russia's crimes against our culture.
Can I just ask that I'm Victoria's agent, and there's a couple of things I think that she said to me in discussion, and one of them was, thank you. So I'm Emma, I'm Victoria's agent. A couple of things about the decision to write in English. One of them was a necessity of speed. So Victoria was very conscious that if she were to write it in Ukrainian, we would probably add maybe 9 months to a year to the publishing process. So that was one factor. And we did have one discussion at one point about writing in English gave her perhaps a little bit more distance, a little bit more detachment. And she said really clearly, if she were to ever write another novel, she wouldn't be writing that novel in English. This was a very clear decision to be doing that for non-fiction, for reportage in English. So absolutely everything you say, Tanya, is right. And I'll just sort of add that little bit extra.
Twitter was in English with 35,000 followers because she wanted to tell the world immediately.
Yes, absolutely. Russell Press?
I don't really have a question, just like so much of it hits so close. And the only comment is that, of course, Vika introduced everyone to everyone, but you introduced me to Vika. So like in this way, it's actually was the other way around. And absolutely true, just like looking through the book, and the people that became very close already after she was killed are in this book. And I just don't know how she does it. But every time I meet a woman and there's some connection, like the last one was Oksana Linev, who is, of course, our very famous, conductor. And she didn't know Vika, but then she's really promoting Volodymyr Vakulenko's books, right? Because she's commissioned orchestral piece and she's playing it all over the Europe. So in a way, I feel like, that a sisterhood that Vika created is really just growing and expanding. And that's really, there's something very magical in it. Sorry, that wasn't a question, and I don't really have any questions, but...
I think that could be a beautiful way to finish, actually, if that's okay. Another round of applause. So please do join us.
I'd like to add two small things, okay?
Sorry.
It seems during this long conversation, and thank you, Lydia, for moderating this presentation, it seems we have not mentioned the main word for Victoria, and this word is justice. During these last days, especially during these last days, many Ukrainians have this feeling that there are some American politicians who say that white is black and black is white. And in this case, it's important for me to ask you to read this book and to share Victoria's text and Victoria's words with the audience here in America and other countries, because it's a very powerful way to speak to other people about Ukrainian feelings during these years of Russia's war against Ukraine. And to explain that for all of us and for Victoria as well, it was important to remember not only about our huge request for peace for our country, for our people, but also for justice. So please remember that peace is the word which has two meanings. It's about peace, but it's also about justice. And this is our main responsibility, to remember that we have so many people who we have lost after Russia started this genocidal war against our country. And this is our responsibility to remember that all these people and our amazing country deserve to have justice after all these crimes Russia committed in Ukraine. And one more thing I asked already yesterday in Washington. It was a huge Victoria's dream to write this book, to publish this book, and to visit all these amazing cities, to meet all of you and to explain her main dreams, her main requests. And we we can't have her here today with us. But the main thing for the author to feel the support of the audience, to feel that you understand, that you respect her work. So at the end of this presentation, I'd like to ask you for a long applause for our dear Victoria.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. And one more way to spread the word and the justice, we have books available. Buy one for yourself, buy one for your friends. Let's distribute to everyone we know.